Doesn't taste like cheese, tastes like cheese sauce. There's a difference.
Hey, what's up? Look, I get that everybody watching this video will have their own idea of what they think healthy eating is, but I think we can all agree that nachos aren't it. So I came up with a lighter weeknight version that is just as sloppy and fun as the real thing, but it doesn't make me feel guilty and or gross. Oh, and it's vegan. Kind of by accident, actually. This is Weeknighting. To get started, I'm going to make some fake cheese, the base of which is made from these raw, unroasted cashews. Yes, this bag did cost about $14, but it makes at least 4 full batches of sauce, and cashews make for a great snack, so I think it's worth it. Now, into a little container, I'm going to measure 100 grams of these raw cashews, and then I'll add in 150 grams of water. Soaking the cashews makes them a lot softer and thus easier to puree into a velvety, smooth cheese sauce. These need about 15 minutes or so to soften up, so in the meantime, let's make the other main component of this dish, refried black beans. For that, I've got 3 cans of black beans at the ready, a half of a red onion, half of a poblano pepper, a lime, and a few cloves of garlic. Oh, and some cumin and some chili powder, but we'll get back to that. For the onion half, I'm gonna give it the weeknight dice, meaning a simple slice across the equator of the onion like this. Then I'm gonna turn it 90 degrees and give it a lazy, rustic chop to finish. In total, this half onion is about 125 grams. For the poblano half, I'm gonna cut out any of the seeds, slice it into strips, and then try to approximate the medium dice that I got on my onions. If you wanted your refrieds to be a little bit more caliente, I would sub in a serrano or a jalapeno pepper. I like the mildness of the poblanos, and all day I've got 50 to 60 grams diced. For the garlic, nothing fancy here. I'm just gonna give it a rough mince. 3 to 4 cloves is in the ballpark of 10 grams. Once that little bit of knife work is done, I'm gonna grab a tall-sided 2-quart pot and lay it down on my stove to preheat over medium-high heat. Once that's hot, in goes a long squiz of neutral cooking oil. Then in goes my onions and my poblanos. Strong pinch of salt, then I'll stir to combine and fry these together for about 2 minutes. Once these are starting to soften up, in goes my 10 grams of garlic, and then I'll stir to combine and fry that up for another 2 minutes. When the aromatics are getting all translucent and softened and starting to smell good and maybe taking on a little bit of color like this, I'm gonna add in 15 grams of ground cumin and 15 grams of chili powder. Another stir to combine, and I'll let these spices bloom out in the oil for about 30 seconds or so. And once everything is smelling fragrant and toasty and the spices and vegetables have come together as one, I'm gonna add in 2 undrained cans of black beans. This bean liquid is full of body and makes for a richer pot of beans in my opinion, but I encourage you to taste the liquid and see what you think. Some bean liquids are thicker or thinner than other ones, and some are a lot saltier than others, so it helps to know what you're adding in and if you like the taste of it. If you want to skip the bean goo, I would sub in about 100 grams of stock per can. Once these beans and their liquor are all stirred in to combine, I'm going to reduce the heat to medium-low and let everything simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes while I take a second to thank the sponsor of this video, Munkpack. Munkpack offers low-sugar, keto-friendly bars that are plant-based, gluten-free, and non-GMO. Outside of cooking comfort foods on the internet, I generally try to eat pretty healthy, and for me, that means cutting back on sugar and carbohydrates when I can. Munkpack bars have 1 gram of sugar or less, they have 150 calories or less, and they have only 2 to 3 grams of net carbs. Personally, I'm a big fan of the almond butter cocoa chip bar because it tastes exactly like the brand name granola bars that I used to dog by the dozen at sport practices as a kid, but it doesn't leave me with a sugar rush or give me a stomach ache like those ones did. Also, like I said, these bars are keto if that's your thing, but if you're not keto, they're still a great snack for anyone that's looking to reduce their sugar intake and eat something that's made from real food. I started eating Munkpack bars in the afternoons when I'm video editing because at that time of day, I get very snacky, and up until now, my only healthy options have been pretty much almonds and apples, and I hate eating those. They're no fun at all. So to improve your snacking situation, try Munkpack. Get 20% off your first purchase of any Munkpack product by using the link in my description and code Brian at checkout. Again, that's 20% off any Munkpack product when you use the code Brian. The link is in the description. Thank you, Munkpack. While these beans finish simmering up, let's make the cashew queso. For that, I'm gonna grab my blender and into it add all of my soaked cashews and their soaking liquid. Behind that, 3 grams of smoked paprika, 5 grams of salt, 10 grams of tomato paste, 5 to 10 grams or most of the juice of half of a lime. We can adjust that as we go. Then the star of this queso and the thing that actually makes it cheesy is 50 grams of nutritional yeast, or as the 20-year-old at the health food store called it, nooch. The main flavor of nooch can only be described as cheesy, and apparently it's full of B vitamins, which is not really easily gettable for most vegan people, as far as I understand. So it's like the king of vegan superfoods, basically, in that goes. Now I'm gonna spin everything up in my blender until I've got a nice, smooth, creamy puree. Sometimes this nooch is a little bit more absorbent than others, so we need to check the viscosity here. And as you can see, my sauce is a little bit drier than needed to spin smooth, so I'm going to drizzle in another 15 to 20 grams of water. You guys might need to do the same thing, but I would say start with the initial 150 grams and see how it goes. I really want this queso to be on the thicker side because loose queso sogs up the chips, and that's a huge bummer. After about 30 seconds of spinning, I'm going to give this a taste to make sure that my salt and lime levels are in balance and to make sure that this puree is smooth enough to be called queso. By the way, when the back of your ladle is all covered in delicious fake cheese, it kind of eats like a savory ice cream cone. Just saying. Checking back on the beans, I can see that these vegetables are fully tender and that the beans themselves are stewed down a little bit and they're looking good. Now, to finish these and give them a proper refried bean smoothness, I'm going to puree the base. If you prefer your refrieds a little bit saucy like this, don't puree it, just add in all 3 cans of the bean up front and their liquid and cook it until this point. I prefer a creamy refried though, so in goes my immersion blender and I'll give these beans a very rustico puree for about 20 to 30 seconds or so. If you don't have an immersion blender or you don't want to get yours dirty, a potato masher would also work to get to this point. And once these are all spun up and looking smooth like this, I'm going to add in a 3rd can of black beans. But this time I did give these beans a rinse under some cold water to remove their liquid. In addition to the smooth, creamy refried bean texture, I also really like the bite of a whole bean in these refrieds. But the trade-off is that they look not appetizing, like at all, but they taste very, very good. Trust me. To make it taste even better, I'm going to add in a long squeeze of lime, maybe 10 grams or so, and then a strong pinch of salt. Stir that in, taste it for seasoning. It tastes great. Looks like shit, tastes great. Now, I'm going to scoot these beans off to a low burner on the back of my stove while I quickly make one more healthy component for this dish, and that's sauteed kale. I've got 2 big bunches of lacinato style kale here. One for this recipe is plenty, but because this stuff cooks down pretty easily and I always love having extra in the fridge, I'm going to make a double batch. As you can see, the first move here is to remove all of the stems. Then I got to cut this down, so I'm going to wad this up into a big pile and squeeze it tightly like this. From there, I'm going to come back with my knife and slice it into thin strips all the way across. When kale is cut on the thicker side, or worse, not cut at all, whether it's cooked or not, it tends to be very tough because there's so much fiber in kale. So for me, the best way to mitigate that toughness is to cut it quite thin like this. Once that kale is cut, I'll give it a quick wash in my salad spinner, and then no need to spin off all that extra moisture. That's actually going to help steam the kale down in the pan. Speaking of which, that pan that we dropped is now hot, so in goes a generous squeezer of oil, and then in goes all that kale. Strong pinch of salt, and then I'll smush everything down with a lid that fits on this pan. This is my go-to move for cooking leafy greens on a weeknight because it keeps all the heat and steam from those veggies right on them and cooks them super quickly as a result. After about 3 minutes of being cooked with no stirring, I'm going to come back and pop that lid off and give everything a stir. As you can see, the steam has shrunk down the fibrous pile of kale by at least half, and the leaves themselves have a nice bright greenness to them. The lid goes back on and I'll cook for about 3 more minutes covered again. After 6 to 7 minutes in total, we'll uncover one more time, and as you can see, the moisture has just about cooked off and we're left with a tender but not mushy, dark, vibrant green kale that is ready to go on just about anything that you want to be healthier. How about some nachos? The first thing down is going to be about 8 to 10 nice sized tortilla chips. Use the brand of your choice. I usually go with something a little bit thicker. Behind that, I'll hit it with 3 to 4 spoonfuls of creamy refried beans and then a few pinches of sauteed kale, maybe about a 1/4 cup. Behind that, I'll hit the beans and kale with a long squiz of chiz sauce. To start layer 2 of these nachos, I'm going to drop another 7 to 8 chips and then 3 to 4 more spoonfuls of beans. Another layer of kale and then another long hit with the cheese bottle. As far as garnishes go, I'm going to start with 4 to 5 large dollops of a generic chunky cooked salsa. The less fancy, the better here. Behind that, I like some fresh cherry tomatoes to bring some fresh wetness, and then some sliced generic black olives, some pickled jalapenos, and then some diced avocado for texture. Guacamole would get lost in the mix of soft, so I'm leaving it out. You guys, these nachos have been in my weeknight rotation for several years now, and I love them because they deliver none of the food punishment that normally comes with a bowl of meat and cheese, but they bring all of the fun. And it only takes like 30 minutes to put together, so I really hope you guys give this one a try soon. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. Let's eat this thing.